What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you part 3 of our Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire series. In the last episode, we successfully liberated Hasango from the clutches of the Naga after the Eothas statue had come through, and we learned a little more about where he was heading, which happened to be the Ashen Maw in the Magran's Teeth volcanic mountain range to the north end of the map. Now, using the magic of YouTube, we've arrived at the Ashen Maw. The first thing we're really going to notice when we walk into Ashen Maw is that we can see Eothas at an Adra pillar in the background. And while there's not much we can do about it, it does set a nice tone for what this area is all about. Now, as we're crossing the bridge here, we're going to find a Rathun warrior. The Rathun are giant fire godlike that are very dedicated to Magran. And we learn from this warrior that Eothas killed a lot of them when he was headed for the Adra pillar here. Now, once we enter the keep proper, we can have a full conversation with a couple of Rathun that aren't actually dying as we speak to them, and they tell us that we can find a Rathun warlord below, and that we can find Magran's shrine as well. And in order to reach Eothas, we're going to have to find the shrine. And basically, while the Rathun are a warrior race who would normally kill us for simply setting foot here, they've quite frankly taken too many casualties for this to be much of a big deal at the moment. So basically they're going to let you go and speak to the warlord. Now, once we go down the stairs from here, we're going to come across a bit of a crossroads after a big fight at said crossroads, where we can enter either a cave or a keep. Now, truthfully, it doesn't actually matter which one of these you enter first, but for the sake of consistency, we are going to enter the keep first. The keep is known as Jagged Keep, and all we're really going to do here is take one of a couple paths to reach the warlord on the other side of this map. The warlord is actually at the Shrine to Magran, which is where we need to be anyway. Now, there's essentially two paths here. There is a third branch, but essentially there's two paths. You can take the middle path, which involves you fighting a bunch of Rathun who are hostile, or you can take the right path if you have the appropriate skills that will let you sneak by and not actually kill any of them. The branch off to the left as you walk into the room will actually lead you to a fight with Rathun if you go there first, but there is a key in that room which will unlock a couple of the doors and save you some hassle if you don't have the mechanic skill to pick any of the locks in here. Once we reach the warlord on the other side, we can have a conversation with him. Now, this is where we need to basically make a decision about if we're going to kill all of these Rathun or not. Now, personally, I recommend you don't kill them. However, if you just want to, you can kill all of these warlords and the Rathun that are around him, as well as the Rathun on your way in here. However, I recommend you don't, because if you instead choose to make a deal with the warlord here, he will A, give you some more information, but B, he'll also give you a buff for when we circle back to that cave I mentioned in just a little bit. So if we choose to talk to the warlord here before just attacking outright, he will explain that the shrine he is at will lower you down to where Eothas is so you could speak to him. However, the shrine will only lower you down if you have the torque of a word I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but you need a special torque that activates the shrine, which is essentially an elevator, that will take you down. However, the torque is in a cave nearby, the cave at the crossroads that I mentioned. The warlord will also tell us that the reason that they're waiting on this, because they were intending to rally their forces and push one last time against Eothas, who is defiling their sacred mountain, is simply that they are trying to awaken their ancient ally, who he goes on to explain is actually a dragon. The warlord here sends his priest, a Brinthus as they call it, to summon this dragon, because this dragon is supposed to be their ancient ally. It is at this point, if you chose to talk to these guys instead of outright kill them, that the warlord here will command his shaman to cast a fire protection spell on you, which is very handy, especially if you plan on fighting the dragon. And then, you could get that and then circle back and then still kill the Rathun if you really wanted to. But in addition to this, once we've had this conversation, if we agree to help the warlord and we didn't kill any of those Rathun on the way in, they all become neutral and we don't have to fight any of them anymore. From here, we're going to double back to that crossroads I mentioned earlier, and we're going to head into the cave this time. Now, the map in here is actually relatively small. There's a fight or two on it, and then we'll eventually come upon a Rathun soul nearby a living Rathun. So the Rathun soul will explain that it was killed by the dragon that is in here, And once we move forward a little bit, because the living Rthun does not have much to say, the dragon itself will bring itself forward in quite the spectacular entrance, to be honest. So the dragon's name is Deadfire. So basically, it will go on to explain that it's a bit of an opportunist. It won't actually say these things, but this is really what I got from the conversation. Essentially, this dragon made a deal with the Rthun's ancestors, where as long as they kept it fed and everything, it would come to their aid in times of need. The dragon, realizing it's not about to kill a god, or even try to, decided it wasn't going to help the Rthun with this, and just started killing them when it came to summon them, because it felt like it was a slight against the dragon's pride to do so. Now, this is, again, where you can choose to either kill the dragon or talk your way out of this situation. You don't have to fight this dragon if you don't want to. The reason for doing so that you might want to is A, because it's clearly not a nice person, or, sentient being, shall we say. But moreover, is the dragon here has a horde. As long as you are not in stealth and you want to just loot that stuff, the dragon will attack you if you try to take any of it. And there's actually some really good, unique items in that horde that you should definitely get. Now, truth be told, you can not kill the dragon and still get those by simply entering sneak mode and then stealing the stuff. It's actually not that difficult. In either scenario, you're either going to have to kill the dragon and then retrieve the torque that you're here after to activate the shrine in the keep from the dead Brinthus nearby, or you're going to have to talk to the dragon and convince it to give you the torque by basically insulting its pride. So the torque is like an object for Magrin, and if you explain that to the dragon, it'll be like, I don't need the idol of some god, that kind of thing. And it'll essentially let you take the torque without having to fight the thing. However, alternatively, you can of course just fight the dragon, and then you can take the torque and everything in its hoard to yourself without much of a fuss, provided you have the ability to kill the thing. Now, once we've successfully retrieved the torque from the dragon, or rather the dragon's lair, we can head back to the shrine in the keep. Now at this point, once we have the torque, we can explain what happened to the warlord. He'll be disappointed, but not particularly surprised, at which point he will move out of your way so you can use the shrine. And upon using it, you will be contacted by Magrin. If you're unaware, Magrin is the goddess of trials and fire and stuff. She will explain to you that she is going to blow up this volcano in an effort to stop Eothas. So, maybe you should leave. Obviously, being in a little too deep at this point, this conversation is fairly short-lived, and you will descend down to speak to Eothas. This is actually a really cool conversation, and it's a bigger part of the game, and it comes with a huge lore reveal. Now, it is worth mentioning that Eothas here does have companion-specific dialogue for some of your companions if they're with you. Jody and Adir, being the, of course, closest to Eothas in terms of worship, have very important things to say, and that's kind of who I'd recommend you have with you, but he does have dialogue that changes depending on who you have with you. This is where he gives you the big lore reveal. Eothas finally explains what he's doing, why he's hauling this Adra statue across the oceans of the Deadfire archipelago here, and where he's going and what he's planning to do. Eothas is planning on revealing the gods for what they are, frauds. As we learned in Pillars of Eternity, the gods aren't real in the traditional sense. The ancient Nguithan society, when looking for the real gods, found that there was none, or rather, if there was, they left a long time ago, and realizing that the world as a whole is going to have trouble coming to terms with that, they decided to make themselves gods. And as we learned from Eothas here, that was done through the use of machinery. Nguithans used actual machinery to take control of the wheel. The wheel is a natural metaphysical process we'll have learned up to this point, by now I'm sure, where souls of the world get reincarnated and kind of pass through from life to life. The Nguithans, again, took that machinery, used it to take control of the wheel, used the power this gave them to install themselves as gods. Eothas plans on revealing this to the world, basically, and he's planning on doing this by going to a place called Ukaizo and breaking this machinery, because again, the machinery that gives the gods this control over the wheel is a very real thing, and it is machinery that is protected by several of the gods' failsafes, in particular Andra's mortar, Magrin's teeth, which is where we are now, along the edge of it, as well as a couple of other things. But essentially, Eothas has revealed his plan. He is planning on heading to the island of Ukaizo, in a very difficult to reach for mortals area of the world, where the physical machinery that the gods use to take control of the wheel is located. Eothas plans on going there and breaking it. Essentially, this is going to break the wheel. And I say break the wheel because while all this machinery technically did was take control of the wheel for the gods, it's worth noting that you can have a conversation with the gods where they explain that they have been in control of the wheel for so long that if control stops, the wheel will stop. So essentially what Eothas is proposing here is that mortals, Kith, and gods need to come together to work towards a solution in the face of the truths of the world and the fact that these gods are in fact manufactured rather than anything real per se, or essentially all of existence is going to be wiped out. Eothas also takes this moment to explain that this was the purpose of him using Widewin, who was an avatar of Eothas, who actually was just a farmer, but Eothas contacted, and ultimately became the avatar to Eothas during the Saints' War that happened prior to the first game. Eothas explains that this entire Saints' War was actually also to this end, that he was planning on using the Saints' War to gather forces to march on Ukaizo to do the exact same thing. Now, at this point, the other gods are basically actively about to attack Eothas in an attempt to stop him. However, it's essentially too late. He knows that they're not going to be effective in doing so. Now, luckily, in order to get us out of this situation, Eothas kindly escorts us out by keeping us safe from these attacks, where Magrin will of course blow up all of the volcanoes around you. Andra, the goddess of the sea, tries to drown you out, that kind of stuff. But ultimately, all of this fails, and Eothas is able to place you safely back on your boat. However, you lose consciousness while you, luckily, get your soul back from the inside of Eothas' statue that he's been using. After all this happens, we finally awaken inside the Kahanga Palace throne room in Nekataka. Apparently our companions sailed us back here, and we've been out of it for quite some time. Now, this is ultimately a meeting of all of the factions in the game. That is to say the Huana, the Principe, the Royal Deadfire Company, as well as the Valen Trading Company. They will all have an argument about how to reach Ukaizo in the face of the fact that Eothas is going there to destroy the wheel. They feel they need to get there to try to help or stop him, one or the other. And at this point, all of the factions make it very clear that they will no longer tolerate any back and forth. So at this point up to the game, you were able to go back and forth between helping one or the other or all of these factions. But now essentially you have to pick a side, and then that side will help you reach Ukaizo. There is a fifth option where you can go to Ukaizo on your own. However, this requires your ship to be upgraded to the maximum. So essentially your choices are side with one of these factions and help them reach Ukaizo, or get your ship upgraded to the maximum point by going and finding the upgrades and then heading to Ukaizo. And that is where we are going to leave part 3. We finally found out what Eothas was stomping across the archipelago for, and it is our goal to reach Ukaizo now to stop him. And in the last episode, which will be the next one, we are going to explore all of the options to get us to Ukaizo and the ending of Pillars of Eternity to Deadfire. And it is in this next video that I will go through kind of all of the things you can do for these factions, which are technically side quests, but obviously you can see it plays into the main story here. As a quick side note before I let you guys go, in addition to the faction side quests, I will be explaining the ending of one of the DLCs that is also part of Deadfire. Not because it's important per se, but it does have some relevance to the ending of the Pillars of Eternity series, at least as far as our Watcher character here is concerned. So technically, for the sake of the game, we are playing the same Watcher from the first game as we are in this game. And one of the endings of the DLC, Beast of Winter, in Deadfire here, has very relevant information as to what happens to the Watcher, which is why I'll be covering it at the end of the next episode as well. With all of that out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. I cannot thank you enough. The channel wouldn't be here without you guys. I mean, it would be, but I wouldn't be getting any views. So the community is really all you guys. So again, just thank you guys so much. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.